So,
What's trending?
bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
Okay, it's taken me about a week to talk about this. I've heard things about the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie story. Now, a manhunt for a man who allegedly, according to news media and a lot of accusations, killed his high school sweetheart, Gabby Petito, now 22, who they went doing the van life together. Not married, well, engaged you could say now, and she went missing, and the next thing you know, it's been ruled a homicide. Her body has been found. This has all developed over the last month. Everything's happened really quickly, and the story is shocking and horrifying. Like I said, I avoided even paying attention to what was happening, and yet alone I've really tried kind of not to talk about it, but finally I think there's a lot to say about the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie story. And if you're not up to date with it, if you've been like me, I really don't want to hear about homicides and murders. I'll give you a very brief overview of that story and another story that should really kind of give us a moment of pause for concern. One, why are so many people talking about this? And two, what can we learn from it? Also, here on Trending, I'm going to propose a challenge for you and I kicking off this October. I hope you will join me. I'm not going to tell you too much about what's happening, what the plan is, but I think it's something that all of us will benefit from. From not just your kids, not just you, not just your spouse, but even the people we interact with day to day. Your faith will grow. You'll have more time for prayer. You'll have more time to get sleep. You'll probably even eat better. You'll have better conversations. It will truly make your life better. So get ready. I'm going to share with you just a little bit about what this 6-week challenge is. And if you can't stay with us for the full hour, be sure to head over to relevantradio.com/trending to subscribe and listen to this podcast. And by the way, invite other people to join this challenge. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can give me a call. The number's 1-888-914-9149. You can also comment live on Instagram with your question. I'd be happy to take your question or hear your thought, especially on the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie story. Why do you think so many people are obsessed with the story? What have you learned from it without getting into the creepy detail? That and more coming up. Okay, so I was at the dentist this week, and I'm laying there having my teeth cleaned. My baby girl's with me, of course. You know, it's just she and I, so she goes from being in the stroller, doing well, to kind of trying to help clean by grabbing onto the machine with the long cords that help to clean the teeth. And then she ended up on my lap, and lo and behold, during the whole series, music is playing. I'm thinking, man, this is very pleasant music to listen to first thing in the morning. Yeah. And it's just kind of the common, a lot of the modern, popular pop content that just, when you don't listen to that music all the time, I realized personally, it was just kind of a lot to hear. So anyways, I just brush it off. I'm kind of trying to tune out the music. It's a little too loud. Not very inspiring at the beginning of the day, especially in a family dental practice. Then, this is what's interesting. The F-bomb is dropped so loud and so intensely in the office, and I'm literally looking around with, the little neck mobility I have, because there's instruments in my mouth probably at the time. What is it with me and dentist stories? I don't know. So I'm looking around. No one cares. No one moves. No one even goes maybe we should change the station. No one apologizes, and I can hear all the other rooms where dental work is being done. No one even acknowledges it. If that were to play in my house, in my car, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And not just if kids were around. It just doesn't really seem like something appropriate to play in a business, a family practice at that. Well, here's the deal. I looked at my baby girl and thinking, okay, it's one time. It's not something that she's going to just cling on to. She's too young for this. However, I was like, is it worth saying something right now? At the moment, I didn't say anything. But what's interesting to me is it brought up a really fascinating story that actually has to do with parent shaming. And I want to unpack it a little bit more. So yesterday I was on Morning Air with John Morales. It's our morning show here on Relevant Radio. If you've never listened to it, I highly encourage you. For the people on the West Coast, it is the early hours of the day. So unless you have a super early commute, you got to catch the podcast. But for more Central East Coast, it's your great morning wake-up conversation. And we were talking about the cancel culture, as I mentioned yesterday on my show. But here's one of the conversations that occurred. A woman by the name of Beverly called in and shared this story that absolutely fascinated me.
Beverly is with us, calling from Friendswood, Texas. Good morning, Beverly.
Good morning. Yes, I had a pretty local example of the cancel culture. My son is a police officer, and he wasn't a chaperone. He was there as like just watching out, and there were around 300 sixth graders at a pizza party. And one of the mother's sons, they kind of host the event, and they're the DJs for the party. And a series of 4 songs came on that were lewd. They used the B word, the F word, assault against women. And my son was listening, and he Googled the artists and the lyrics, and he went up to one of the chaperones and said, do you know what these kids are listening to? And the lady said, oh no, I'm old, I can't understand. And my son said, oh, she was about 40 years old, so I mean that's not old. And he showed her on his phone the lyrics, and she kind of shrugged like, oh geez, now I have to deal with this. Long story short, my son's girlfriend posted on Facebook about this, not accusing anybody, not getting mad, just saying, parents, be aware of what your children are listening to. And there were over 300 responses to her post, basically saying, oh, the lady that put it on, she's a good mom, the kids are good. No one was attacking the mother. No one was attacking the children. What the point was, listen, pay attention to what's going on in your children's lives. Listen to the music they're listening to. There were maybe a handful, possibly a handful of people that agreed this was wrong. And I'm even thinking, I mean, I'm 67. My children are out of the district. We're not even from here. I'm even thinking of going to a school board meeting and bringing it up. But it was just this pervasiveness of, no, it's okay, Elvis was bad in his time, and basically the parents didn't want to hear it. And it's frightening to know that sixth graders their parents are basically, leave it alone, let it go, let it pass.
Thanks, Beverly. Timmerie, your perspective on this.
Wow, Beverly, I am so glad you just shared this story, because this touches on everything from the cancel culture to parents who are exhausted, or parents who defend this idea of, quote, parent shaming. This is a story that was fascinating to me to hear. Beverly sharing everything from the fact that no one did anything, that 4 songs in a row were explicit toward women, negative toward women, derogatory, dropped F-bombs, the B word. And here, lo and behold, he pulls up the lyrics, is shocked by the music, takes it then to the head organizer of the event, and she's annoyed that he brought it up. And now she's also annoyed that she has to do something. When the girlfriend takes it to Facebook, there were 300 responses. And most of them were criticizing the story in the respect that this was parent shaming and defending this woman. Oh, she's a great mom. She's a good mom. I'm sorry, but this had nothing to do with whether or not she was a good mom. This had to do with us as a culture being okay with explicit, derogatory, and might I say, physically harmful songs being sung about women in vulgar language in front of 6th graders. Okay, so this is what's fascinating. This ended up turning into a whole conversation about parent shaming, where people get upset and throw out the words parent shaming. Now, the actual idea of what parent shaming is would be that, for example, I'm criticized as a parent for doing something that someone doesn't like that I'm doing. It could be just criticism. It could be undue criticism. But here's what parent shaming has turned into, people. We hate hearing anything that reminds us that we coulda, woulda, shoulda. We hate anything that we think other people are thinking about us to make us feel parent shame, even though they didn't even actually say it. They didn't even actually allude to it, but we're assuming and putting words into their mouth. We just don't like any comment about anything that could have to do with regard to our parenting. But here's the problem. We hate it anytime people tell us anything of what we should have done, could have done, or what we would do differently in the future. Why? Because our conscience kicks in. First, it starts with denial. Second, it starts with defense of our actions if we don't want to course correct. Then, really, this justification. And then we draw our line in the sand of you versus me because I don't like what you told me that I disagree with regard to my parenting. Now, this entire story, had nothing to do initially with this mom. It had to do with the fact that there was bad music being played that was literally physically harmful and damaging toward women, verbally abusive, and it was being played around 6th graders. So what's kind of, I think, the big picture? We have to let go of this permeating culture of feeling parent shame. Maybe there are legitimate things that legitimate things that we do wrong, probably every single day, that we do need to grow in. But we need to stop being so sensitive if other people have other ways and they give feedback or critique. Grant, you shouldn't go around telling other parents what to do. But there's nothing wrong if you're a chaperone and you hear a bunch of explicit content about women, physically harmful content, and verbally inappropriate content for 6th graders. There's nothing wrong with saying something. And no one needs to come to the defense of another parent going, oh, they're a great mom. Oh, you're parent shaming. No. This has to do with the reality that kids need their parents. And kids need their parents to be what? To take on the role of responsible parenthood, which is what we as Catholic spouses commit to at the altar. At the altar, we have to understand that we are committing to not only our spouse, but toward children. The natural end of marriage is children and the procreation and education of children. The natural end of marriage is having children and educating them. When I say educate, I'm not saying just sending them to school to get their math or science or English, all their STEM and everything. I'm saying an education in the faith. I'm saying a rich education in virtue ethics and morality and right and wrong and goodness and joy and fostering the very gifts that your own child has and their natural proclivities. I was thinking about another example of parent shaming that I think has to do with this that I want to touch on in a moment here. But here's the reality. We have to overcome this whole fear of the entire situation that if something explicit is being said and you're not okay with that being said around your kid, we still need to be willing to say something and not be afraid of being canceled. Sure, this one instance solicited 300 responses, most of whom saying, don't parent shame, this person's a great mom. Again, it had nothing to do with them being a great mom. Great moms can make mistakes. Great dads can make mistakes. And in fact, a lot of us need help being accountable for the things that we can do better at times. It's called being human. We're not perfect. And I was also thinking about another example because I've been reading some of the development of kids recently and, what happens as kids are developing. And I was thinking about how so often when a kid's under the age of 2 and the baby's in this mommy phase only, even preferring mommy over dad, or not wanting grandparents instead of they want their mom, not wanting to go too far out of the room, being traumatized in a sense if you walk out of the room. Why does that happen? Well, before I go there, a lot of the time you'll hear people complain, oh, your child's too attached. Your child's not going to have healthy social skills. Your child should be able to sit down and play with the other kids, or you should be able to leave for a few hours. I'm not disagreeing with any of this. People say you're spoiling her. There are all these things that people will say. But the reality is, if you follow any sort of psychological development, proper attachment in a certain phase of life, the reality is kids need their moms accessible, especially within the first few years. During the first 2 years in particular, this mommy phase that comes and goes is quite natural. It's actually them developing survival instincts by learning through the mother healthy relationships, healthy introductions, safe attachments, safe greetings, being introduced to people to know that the mom's saying, hey, this is a safe person, so I can learn through mom that this person's safe. I can also be safe by being with mom. The child learns speech, tactile skills, motor skills. It's fascinating. Yet it's so easy for someone to say, oh, you can't even, set your kid down for a second. Well, little do you know that's just a day. That's just a day where the baby's in the baby phase in developing a sound sense of attachment through that phase that is natural and normal. A baby should be attached through these phases. Studies show this is normal, this is healthy, and then actually it's most ideal for the baby to have complete access to their mom in the first few years of life. In fact, it was fascinating. There was this self-proclaimed progressive feminist who wrote actually an entire book on this. I'm forgetting the name of the book right now. But she wrote a book about how the first 3 years are pivotal, that if you want to work, if you want to achieve, all these things in your personal life, that's great, but prioritize those first few years with your kids, because this is really important for developing skills, attachment, having a well-adjusted and well emotionally developed child. It's very important. And yet, coming kind of full circle on this whole thing, it's so easy to be on one side versus the other. Criticizing versus experiencing parent shame, or accusing other people of parent shame. But at the end of the day, I think as parents, it's important to remind ourselves as Catholic parents, the call to be the primary educators of our children, that we're called to the procreation and education of our kids since the end of marriage, to raise up ultimately what? Saints. To populate heaven, to fill heaven with these children who are raised well. And we're called to sacrifice what is necessary in order to make that happen. Is parent guilt legitimate? Yeah. Are there things we need to course correct? Absolutely. But it's important that we're not just getting annoyed when someone brings something up. For example, the story in the call from Beverly is a fantastic example of how this specific instance, this woman didn't want to do anything with the explicit language and music that was being played, and was annoyed when someone else brought it up, like, great, now I have to deal with it. Well, why was that? Because sometimes we engage, all of us, not just parents, in willful ignorance. That we don't want to have to deal with something, so we try not to learn anything about it. We try to ignore it. We try to block it out. Or we don't want to do the uncomfortable thing of saying, hey, pizza place, let's change the music. It's not age appropriate. The reality is usually people could be just as clueless and not know what the content was. But it's a good, I think, challenge and reminder of what's coming in. What are we hearing? What are we listening to? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it building up who we are? Is it destroying who we are? All of this is actually going to bring us to the 6-week challenge I want to talk about, what content we're listening to. And this actually has to do with the story that's sweeping the nation of Gabby Petito, the missing person and then now officially proclaimed death and homicide. And the accused, the suspect, should I say, is a Brian Laundrie, her high school sweetheart. We're going to come back talking about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, what we should know, not getting too much into the nitty-gritty horror of the story, but why is the world obsessed with this story? Why are we obsessed with it, and what can we learn from it? Also coming up, that 6-week challenge I have for all of us. Don't go away. I can't wait to share with you what we're going to start this October. Catholic Order of Foresters is proud to sponsor the Relevant Radio Studio line. For information about employment opportunities and flexible premium life insurance plans, visit relevantradio.com/forester.
bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
I'll just tell you, I hate even thinking or talking about this story. I intentionally avoid stories such as this. Have you heard the story of Gabby Petito, 22, and Brian Laundrie? He is a suspect, and a lot of people are saying, he had to have been the one who killed her. They were high school sweethearts. They decided to do the van life. And I know that they're engaged. I don't know what point they got engaged. So in 2021, this summer, they decided in July that they were going to go on a 4-month van life national park tour. What's the van life? That's where, for some reason, all of these, my generation, the millennials, as well as Gen Z, are deciding, sell everything, throw it to the wind, and just live in a different city each month. And then others are doing, let's just live in a van and travel the nation. Well, they decide to go on a 4-month national park tour cross country. In August, just a month, barely into their van life national park tour, they were picked up by police. And for what would essentially be, domestic abuse between the two. They were let off the hook because they were young. They had been, back and forth. Then move on. August 19th, they started a van life story. They were chronicling their story, and they did a post on social media about it, I believe on Instagram. 24th of August, they were seen in Salt Lake City. 25th, Gabby receives the last contact from Gabby is received from the parents, and then they are known to have been at Grand Teton National Park. And actually, this isn't the last contact of the parents, the 25th. That's actually the last time she posts on social media. Then all of a sudden, and there were other text messages and conversations that occurred. All of a sudden, September 1st, Brian Laundrie shows up back home in Florida, and next thing you know, he's staying with his parents, and he's refusing to talk to anyone, say anything. All of a sudden, 10 days later, on September 11th, she's reported by her parents as missing. He's refused to talk to her parents, say anything about the last time he saw her. On the 15th, then, all of a sudden, Brian Laundrie is a person of interest in the story. Why did it take this long? How was he not a suspect sooner? Then on September 17th, all of a sudden, Brian Laundrie's parents, again, this is 2 days after he's suddenly a person of interest, say, we haven't seen him in 3 days. Last time we saw him was 3 days ago. And he was seen headed in the direction of some marshy forest land in Florida, which some people have commented isn't an area that people could really survive in, but he's known to have these survival skills. Well, in the meantime, I think somewhere around September 19th, a body is found, and by the 21st, not only is it confirmed that it's her remains, but it's also confirmed that this was death by homicide. This past Sunday was the funeral for Gabby Petito. This is a beautiful, adorable, young, vibrant girl who I'm sure people can say had her faults, did things she shouldn't have done. And we may even talk about that a little bit here. But what happened? Did Brian Laundrie kill Gabby Petito? I don't know. Does it sound like it? Yes. There were also 2 other people who were killed near some of the same areas they were at right as this all was occurring. So the question is, did they both also kill these 2 women as well? There's so much to the story. You could go on and on and on. There are a lot of details. A lot of you are probably deep into the nitty-gritty. Here's my first question. Why is the nation captivated by the story? Why? I think that's a really, really important question. I think, one, the media has actually pushed this story on us. I do. I think the media has actually, taken this story and really blown it out of proportion. People have also commented, and I do think that this is true, notice that for some reason the media usually only covers white girl missing stories, and that is a true fact. That is absolutely true, and that is wrong. But I also think that the media shouldn't be covering these stories in this way to begin with. And there's a reason why we didn't grow up on the news in my house. We didn't have the news on. We didn't watch it regularly. Because it's traumatic. It's horrible to hear these stories happen. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, to touch on some of the reasons why I think we're obsessed with this and what's wrong with that. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. My first thing I want to touch on, and Lucas, my producer, just mentioned this during the break. I think he said he thinks maybe one of the reasons why so many people are interested in the story isn't just because the media has forced it upon us, but he said we're eager to unite around something, have something common, something that we can all perhaps talk about, something that draws similarities to us. I mean, I can think of people I know who all of a sudden are in massive conversations. Well, did you hear this? Did you hear the latest about that? And all of these details, are we interested to try and solve the mystery ourselves? Are we horrified, and do we see ourselves that could be in this story? All of that, I think, is relevant. All of that is part of the story. But let's touch on the van life part of it, and then I'll get more into why we're obsessed with this. I think that the van life is what I want to talk about here for a second. Why? Because I know people, and I know Patrick is like rolling over. He doesn't even want to talk about this Gabby Petito story. He doesn't want to talk about van life because, one, it's another horrific story no one should want to hear the details of. And two, it's another group of millennials or Gen Z taking off saying, I'm going to travel the world. I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to shirk all duty and responsibility. I'm going to shack up with the person I'm living with. All of that's fine. Why are we even talking about this? Well, for some reason, I think these people who are trying to live the van life, which I find totally boring, like the next person who tries to show me a stupid YouTube video or anything else about the van life, like, please. I remember not too long ago, I was sitting at someone's house, and during social time, they kept turning on videos, and the videos were of the van life. I'm like, I don't care where this darn van is. It is boring, okay? Like, let's play a game or something. Let's have a conversation, not watch van life movies. Okay, this van life is an attempt at a simple, minimalistic life. But in reality, this van life, I actually do think is an attempt at detachment. Of wanting to detach from a lot of the things of this world and wanting to discover something more than yourself, or to discover yourself in the midst of that through exploring nature, having fewer things. I think a lot of people are overwhelmed by materialism. A lot of people are overwhelmed by the pressures of life. They don't want to work. They'd love to travel the world. I'll raise my hand. I would love to just travel to beautiful places, sit beneath waterfalls, and I love camping, but I don't know that I could do a whole van life. I mean, I know I couldn't do van life. I could maybe do like short-term glamping in terms of like doing the van life 4-month thing, because I'm all about camping. Like dirty, no showers, that's fine. I think I've gone like 10 weeks. I'm itching my head at 10 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, not having like a legitimate shower, showering in the creek and whatever. But here's the deal. I think this really does come back to this whole van life idea. Seeking detachment. It's not just this minimalistic lifestyle. The detachment is in the van, and the outdoors is where they're seeking God. They're looking for the transcendent. They're looking for something grander and greater than themselves. Listen, I know, gentlemen, that every single one of you has a dream that you want to live on a boat. I know this is a thing. Every single dude. Many men end up saying, thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate you said that you don't want to live on a boat. But a lot of men do actually say, like, I would like to live on a boat. Or some people say tiny homes as well. I think there's this desire for minimalism. There's this desire, but what they're looking for, again, is detachment. They're looking for detachment to attach themselves to things that are properly ordered, to discover God and the simplicity and the transcendent and the grandeur and the greater of the beauty of nature. But on the other end of this, so I think that's the van life side of it. The other side of it, here are two high school sweethearts, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. Why are we talking about this? Because I think there's a lot to learn, and I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, horrible details of the story. But I almost think that they started this van life off, even though they've been together for a number of years now. I mean, she's 22. They were high school sweethearts. I think that they started this off in this like honeymoon, idealistic, romantic phase. We're going to travel across the nation in a van. How fun. They're going to document and chronicle the whole story as they cross the nation. Well, I'll just say this for one moment, and I know some people are going to be offended by this, but that's okay. You know, my husband was talking about life insurance the other day, and he was talking about, you know, okay, let me give you an update on these two different means of life insurance that we have if anything happens. I'm thinking, you know, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, they at least could have gotten married first and had insurance policies on each other. I mean, come on, if you're going to bump her off, at least make the commitment to get something out of it. I mean, I know it's horrible to say, but here's the deal. Not getting married is cheap in so many ways. It's cheap in so many ways. There's so few benefits to not getting married. And I think that this whole van life and the fact that Gabby Petito is literally 6 feet under dead is an example of that. Because they were in a honeymoon phase. They weren't married. They were traveling, shacking up together, living together, crossing the country together. I think it probably was very comfortable for them given that they were high school sweethearts and had been together for too long. But this is what happens. Let me say this over and over again. When you take sex outside of marriage, you do not end up with someone who is safe. Now, I'm not saying take this to an extreme and scare the living daylights out of your kids that because they're having sex before marriage, they could be murdered, such as Gabby Petito was. But what I'm saying is this. I worked in the crisis pregnancy centers for years. I saw girls who were pregnant, not pregnant, had abortions, were seeking abortions. Girls who were just looking for a better way of living. And here's what I saw. And I've worked with college students, high school students for years now. When you take sex outside of marriage, you put yourself in circumstances with a person of the opposite sex, especially for women, with someone who you do not know if they are trustworthy. They have not proven for long enough that they will lay down their life for you, that they will have self-control with their body for you. You've foregone all of that. You don't know if this person is safe. And Grant, here she is. She's been dating him since high school. They're high school sweethearts. She probably thought he was safe. Okay, well, yeah. High school, college, all of these years are pivotal years where people change. And when you're sleeping with someone ongoingly, a chemical cocktail's kicking in your brain. The serotonin, the oxytocin, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, the endorphins, all of these 5 chemicals that are kicking in, creating a chemical cocktail to create literally love goggles to make you view the other person in a better way, to overlook their faults. That's great within the context of marriage. Because guess what? We have faults. And praise the Lord, there are things that can help our spouses to be more patient and generous in their thoughts towards us. This is a gift within marriage. Marriage is difficult. God gave us many gifts in marriage and intimacy, and the benefits of intimacy, this is one of them, that chemical cocktail. But when you're not married, you're bonding to someone. You're overlooking things you shouldn't be overlooking. You're missing things that change with your spouse. I think this is part of the reason why many years later, women discover that their spouse has a pornography addiction. Because in one respect, there's the gift of overlooking little things of someone else. But in the other respect as well, it's sometimes a problem that has actually occurred prior to marriage, but we didn't realize it because we were engaging with our bodies in some of the most intimate, loving, what should be loving acts that were blinding us because love was blind in those moments. It wasn't totally sacrificial and self-giving because it didn't include self-control and long-term commitment. And this also leads to how we as women especially tend to just start to put up with things. And in fact, it's been commented on that Gabby Petito's boyfriend, Brian Laundrie, was a very jealous individual. You know, this also brings up I don't know what Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie were doing. Some people, it's been shared that they smoked pot. I don't know how often. It's also been shared that these two, have done a lot of things that have led to a certain type of lifestyle that I wouldn't be surprised if they were one of those young couples, because this is really normal, that watch porn together. Let's be real. There are documentaries about this. This is encouraged. Well, this also points to the problem of porn, even if just one side was using it. The porn culture has led to increase in violence in sexual relationships and just relationships in general. Porn also leads to increase in pressure, especially pressure put upon women to perform in particular ways that are violent, but be harmful. I think that all of this is a reminder that there's a problem with not just having sex before marriage, but there's a problem when we allow ourselves through that to engage in this chemical cocktail and overlook the harmful behaviors of other people that can put us into really dangerous circumstances. And that, I believe, is part of the Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie story. Whether or not he killed her, obviously this man was not willing to protect her, and he's guilty of something. If he's gone missing, if he's disappeared, if he didn't report her missing, if all of these things are the case, I do believe he probably did murder her. But I think that either way, even if he didn't, something was off. And this touches on, I think, another issue, an important thing that I want to talk about this Thursday during our marriage hour, and that is, what about mental health in relationships? Is mental health in relationships important? How do you check in? How do you know if your spouse or the person you're dating is still in a good place? Come on. Have you had a stalkery ex-boyfriend before, or someone who's just creepy when they break up with you? Have you had a needy ex-girlfriend or a needy ex-girlfriend, or, a needy spouse? And I was even just thinking about the last year. I was on the phone last night with a dear friend of mine. Both of us have moved across the country, away from our home of origin, away from a lot of our loved ones and what's familiar, and with having little kids as well. She's like, yeah, I think, it was easy to struggle with depression that time. I said, yeah, it's very easy. It's difficult. How does that impact your marriage? We're going to talk about that part of it here on Trending on Thursday during our weekly marriage hour, so be sure to join us for that. Coming back up, I do want to touch on another point in this Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie story, and it has to do with obsessions that we have as a culture. Another shocking story that came out of Corona, California, about a 20-year-old guy who was watching the movie The Forever Purge, and he did something in that movie theater that I think relates back to this Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie story. I'll be right back here on Trending, and don't forget, I have a 6-week challenge for you. So don't go away. We're starting October 1st, and I hope you'll join me.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
We've been talking about the Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie story, not getting into the nitty-gritty, but more so, why is the nation swept away in obsession over the story? I'll get to that in just a moment. I want to encourage you, October is the month of the Rosary. And I want to encourage you to pray your rosary daily if you aren't already. And if you are, invite others to do so. You can join us during the Family Rosary across America here on Relevant Radio just after my show Trending. Listen live, pray live, and share your intentions. Also, kicking off next week, we're going to kick off a series on the Rosary. I'm going to walk through each and every single one of the decades during the month of October to really unpack what is the Transfiguration. What is the Annunciation, the Assumption? We'll get into the biblical roots, the tradition of the teaching, and so much more. So I'm really excited for that series. But let's come back to the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie story. If you have a comment to that, give me a call. The number is 1-888-914-9149. I want to talk about why we're obsessed over this Gabby Petito story. You can also share your comments live on my Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. I'll share your comments and thoughts. But first, we have a call coming in from Gulfport, and it's Paul calling about the Gabby Petito story. Paul, what's your thought here?
Well, you just touched on the notion of how the conjugal relationship affects your view of the other person, and that's a gift that God gave us, and that's so true. And it's one of the reasons why addictive drugs are such a problem, and addiction to pornography and sex is the same thing, and it's because it's antithetical to our free will. It takes away our ability to be objective about making a choice about a spouse if you're having premarital sex, and so that goes against the gift of free will that we have that God has given us, and so that's an important aspect that I think people sometimes overlook in terms of what's right and wrong and why something is wrong.
Absolutely, Paul. This is a really good point. The Gabby Petito story, she had love goggles on, living together, traveling cross country together, having sex outside of marriage with someone. You get love goggles on. You have, I just explained, the chemical cocktail going on in the brain. You miss what's happening. But when you are doing any type of drug, marijuana included, I don't care if it's, quote, legal, it impairs your objective choices. Drinking, this is why I say you shouldn't drink when you're dating someone. I think this is really important. And so all of this prevents you from making an objective choice and from also viewing a person and keeping yourself in safe circumstances. Okay, but why the odd obsession? We've been talking about the Gabby Petito story for a while now. Why the odd obsession? Well, honestly, I told you before, I didn't want to talk about the story because these stories freak me out. I don't want to know all the details, even though it's easy to get pulled into the timeline, the story, the mystery of it, wanting to solve it, wanting to get all the additional pieces of information. But here's the deal. Do you know that the top rated, the top listened to, the most listened to podcast content is true crime stories? That's a little creepy. The top-rated podcast charts feature true crime stories because that's what people listen to the most. We as a culture are fascinated, not just by story, but by sinister mystery, even being true life stories of people's lives who are torn apart. We're obsessed with death. We're obsessed with sin. We're obsessed ultimately with evil. This is what's interesting. So it's actually well known that Gabby Petito had been consuming, reading, listening to all over content about the Zodiac Killer before she died. The Zodiac Killer who is known to have killed 5 victims in Northern California, San Francisco, between 1968 and 1969. This is a real person. It's also believed that he killed another 20 to 28, although not confirmed and fully fallen under him as being the killer. He claimed personally that he killed 35 women. Gabby Petito was obsessed with the story of the Zodiac Killer. And what's wrong with us being obsessed with the story of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie? We're kind of falling down this rabbit hole of the top charts being about true crime, Gabby Petito following the Zodiac Killer, and her boyfriend Brian Laundrie listening to the same stories. I think that all of this comes to this idea that it's so easy for us to be consumed by content, by sinister stories, by wanting to solve the mystery. And I want to encourage you, if you're following the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie story, and I know a lot of you, especially on Instagram, are commenting, sharing all these details about it, it is and it can be interesting. But is this story actually good for us? Was it good for Gabby Petito to be reading and listening about the Zodiac Killer, which, by the way, I mentioned before, there were 2 other women near and around the same time that were killed in one of the park areas that Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie had been to as they were traveling cross country. It's time to stop with this morbid fascination with death. This morbid fascination with death leads us to desensitize the reality of death and killing. It's making us numb. And we're already numb enough to the entire issue with regard to abortion. I mean, the fact that just over the last few days, a United States House of Representatives passed an act sending it to the Senate that is the most radically pro-abortion and damaging abortion bill we have ever seen. Praise the Lord, I do not believe the Senate will pass, but we have to pray, we have to reach out, we have to speak up to stop this. Because that's the next step. I don't think they'll get the majority necessary in order to make that happen, but still. We are so obsessed with death. We are so okay. We're so numb. We're so desensitized. There's another story that was just brought to light. My mom brought it up to me. She also was like, you got to talk about Gabby Petito because there is something wrong here. And it's a story in Corona, California this summer in July. A 20-year-old young man was at a movie watching the movie The Forever Purge. If you don't know anything about the Purge films, which I knew nothing, and I'm glad I didn't because I was horrified when I heard what it was. It's essentially all about lawlessness. One day where all crimes legal and all emergency services are suspended. Well, guess what happened? True story, Corona, California. This July, this 20-year-old shot 2 people in the movie theater. No one supposedly heard or saw it happen. The 2 people were found by the theater people after the movie who were going in and cleaning up the movie theater. This guy's a TikTok and Instagram influencer. This story is continuing to develop this week where he's claiming insanity and that he was diagnosed with supposedly schizophrenia and he wasn't taking his medication at the time. Okay, that may or may not be true. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to follow the story, but here's the deal. Why was he watching that movie to begin with? Why was this movie made? Why was Gabby Petito and why were Brian Laundrie watching the Zodiac Killer? Why are we obsessed with the Gabby Petito story? Because we're obsessed with, honestly, looking and listening to things that are frightening, that are demonic, that are evil. Why? Are we looking for it as a distraction? Yeah, I think it is a distraction. Some people have commented it was a distraction from politics right now. Some people have commented that it's to help bring something uniting for us to talk about. All of this comes back to something that I think is fundamentally important. The content we are consuming across the board is leading us to have no rest, no self-control, for us to not even know our emotions. We're chasing chemical cocktails for the next high, the next intense experience. I believe this is probably part of Brian Laundrie as well as the Corona Killer story. They wanted something intense. They wanted to feel something. They wanted to do something. Because whether it's a pornography addiction, screen addiction, intense story addiction, to podcasts about the Zodiac Killer or any other true crime story, what is this all leading us to? Overuse of our technology, overuse of movies, all of this. We don't have time for religion. We're not praying. We're never at peace. We're constantly in a state of anxiety. We have these major stress hormones that are kicking in with our fight or flight mode constantly, the state that we are in, with our cortisol levels off the chart. This is why we ourselves are also obsessed with the Gabby Petito story, and we've got to stop. We've got to let go of the story. We've got to let go. And I'm not saying give up on her and pray for them, pray for the family, but we have to be willing to walk away from these things. And this is why I want to encourage you to engage in a 6-week challenge I have for all of us starting October, and I'm not going to say ending November 12th, but reevaluating November 12th. I really want to encourage you to work on unplugging. I've encouraged you before the black and white challenge here on Trending to turn your screen to black and white mode so that you are using your phone less because the dopamine levels, because we get dopamine rushes over notifications, we get dopamine rushes from the colors, we get dopamine rushes from the likes, the dislikes, all of this. I want to encourage you, shut off the TV. Stop watching your shows. Delete social media. Only take your phone down to the bare bones. No games, none of it. Engage in a digital detox, a screen detox to the best of your capacity. Starting October 1st. Which, by the way, it's a month of the Rosary, and we're encouraging everyone to pray the Rosary daily. That's one thing you can do instead. The author of Glow Kids, Dr. Nicholas Corderis, who deals with addiction, he wrote a book a few years back titled The Glow Kids, How Screen Addiction is Hijacking Our Kids and How to Break this track and how to, restore ourselves back to a baseline level. He said this about adults needing to reduce screen time. He said 6 weeks is what allows a person's adrenal system to re-regulate itself and get back to baseline. We need 6 weeks. We need to let go of the Gabby Petito story. We need to let go of all of our shows, our movies, all of it. Because here's the deal. I promise you, you are going to be happier. You're going to be better rested. You're going to have more time to pray. You're going to sleep better. You're going to have more time to cook. You're not going to feel as lonely or depressed because you're going to find moments perhaps of boredom where you're going to call up that old friend, get together with someone, spend time with your family. I want to encourage you for 6 weeks, starting October 1st, heck, why not start now, that you'll engage in a 6-week detox from screens, from social media, from movies, from any TV show. So what if you missed a show? I haven't had a TV for over a year now, and I am so glad. Okay, I hear people on social media are saying I'm in. Lover1970 is saying I'm in, among other people. A lot of people are saying COVID didn't help. COVID didn't help our screen time. It's not helping us in our faith. I want to encourage you. It's time to quit. We'll talk about this challenge more tomorrow, and I'll share with you a little bit of what it's been like watching movies or TV shows on occasion now after not having a TV, what I've learned about fight or flight hormones, my response, and so much more. So engaging the 6-week challenge, I'll share more. We'll discuss it more tomorrow. I hope you'll join me. But if you have thoughts on the Gabby Petito story, I'd love to hear from you. But let's move past it and stop with this morbid obsession. Nick Cannon's therapist has suggested celibacy after his 7th child has joined the family. This is Timmerie from Trending with Timmerie. Coming up on Wednesday, what do you think about there being a female James Bond for the next James Bond actress, should I say? And why do we love James Bond? And what about him do we idealize in masculinity? Join me daily at 6 p.m. Central on Relevant Radio or the Relevant Radio app.